Hey there, welcome to this week's episode of Bloomerang TV. Thanks for hanging out with us today. It's Red Nose Day, which is perhaps ironic because I've got my guest here and we want to rant. We're kind of upset. There was some bad news that came out in the sector and we want to rant about it for a while. So Susan Axelrod's here with me, one of our first Bloomerang TV guests, one of our early adopters, someone that I'm very appreciative of for believing in this video podcast when we were getting it off the ground. So Susan, thanks for coming back. Thanks for being our first repeat guest as well. How's it going, Susan?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Thanks so much for having me. Things are going great. You may recall I launched my Confident Fundraising business on my webinar that I did with you guys. Mm-hmm. And I guess that's kind of what brings us to this call today, this live call, very unplanned call, because of the prolific number of conversations I've had with nonprofit CEOs just since last October, based on that webinar, which was an offshoot of that first live podcast. So let's get to it.
Yeah, what's going on? There was some bad news that came out, I think, this week about some fraud. Some people were taking advantage of nonprofits, stealing money. What's going on here?
Yeah, so $187 million. $187 million were given over a period of time to 4 cancer-related charities. These were charities, organizations run by people who are connected with each other, but in different states. And as far as we know, the reporting is that less than 3% of the money raised actually went to purpose, but more importantly, most of the rest of that money went to support the lifestyles of these individuals, and that's really heartbreaking for me.
This is like the overhead myth turned completely upside down, right? Because I know a lot of people, people feel strongly when 100% of the funds go towards the mission, and it's like, well, are you paying your people? How are you doing that? But this is like the opposite extreme, right, where almost no money went towards the actual services.
Right. You know, I'm totally on board with paying smart, talented business people for the worth, the value, the skills, the expertise they bring to your organization. It's a whole philosophical discussion. We could have it another time. Right. Should a nonprofit CEO earn $1 million? That's not what our conversation is about today. Our conversation is about transparency. It's about a nonprofit CEO knowing what their job is, doing their job. It's about board members being responsible as they are legal fiduciaries of their organizations. And it's about donors taking more time to vet their gifts to organizations or the organizations they're choosing to support.
So is that how it happened? Is it those 3 groups? Are they equally culpable? I mean, how does this actually happen in 2015 in America, where this can actually go down without anyone really noticing or saying anything about it?
First of all, it's not that it went down with anybody noticing or saying anything about it. Media has been reporting on it. These organizations have been looked into. I'm not exactly sure what led to this final, to tell you the truth, I didn't do the research yesterday, what led to this final explosion review by the FTC. But I do want to remind our friends who are with us today that it was in 1992 about that William Aramone. People say that he abused his position at United Way of America by spending too much money. He was ousted from that organization. It was a big scandal in the nonprofit sector. It was 2008, hard to believe, but it was 2008 when Bernie Madoff, the whole tragedy around the Bernie Madoff scandal. So these things do happen, and honestly, my work is so grounded in building authentic personal relationships with your donors and having responsible board members. I just don't understand how this much time has passed and this much money was given. Largely, I think it was through telemarketing. And one of the things, Steve, that I'm wondering is if there's an unusually large senior population which I'm going to research, of people who are home, so happy to have somebody to talk to them on their phone, and so easily taking their credit cards out as we do now, and making donations.
Yeah. So obviously, this is an isolated incident. I don't think there's anything sort of running rampant through the sector, but it did happen. We can't change it happen unless we build a time machine, which I don't think either of us can do. But what can we do as a sector going forward, in your opinion, to maybe prevent this, to keep our eyes open for things, and maybe the better question is, how can we promote this idea of transparency and accountability, sector-wide among board members, staff, donors, all of them?
Okay, well, as important as you and I are, and of course we are, we're not in, the decision-making role up at the top of the nonprofit sector. The national organizations that create policy, that communicate messaging, that hold, the space of responsibility for organizations. So I can urge them to do what they should be doing. Mm-hmm. So if we come down out of that space, which I hope they're paying attention, the place where you and I can make an impact is through a conversation like this today. Any individual who's listening today, who's in a decision-making spot in a nonprofit, with a nonprofit, for a nonprofit, you have the opportunity and the responsibility. And Steve, that's really the truth. That's really what it comes down to in the end. That every individual surrounding these type of people, criminals, who do this, what were they thinking? Who are they? How are they living with themselves? But you and I and everyone in our existence, each one of us can take our own responsibility, and that's the only way I can answer the question right now, Steve.
Yeah, I think that's it, really.
Right?
So, what do you think about the donors who have given to these organizations, who are maybe just becoming aware of the issue? What would you say to those folks who maybe, they had their money directly, at least, somewhat taken advantage of?
Oh, yeah, stolen.
Yeah, absolutely. What should we say to donors to maybe prevent them from losing trust and ever giving to another nonprofit ever again?
Okay, so that's a good question. I wrote a LinkedIn post this morning, and also I put it on my Facebook pages, urging people to not stop giving.
Yep.
Okay? Regarding the question of what I would say to the donors who gave and whose money was stolen and is undoubtedly lost, they're not getting that money back. I don't know what the highest level gifts were for, coming from what donors, and again, we have to leave that in the hands of the law, frankly. But more likely, actually, it's a strategy that I do teach organizations, is there's the top end, the confident fundraising, the high level personal solicitation strategies, and then there's that big bottom of the pyramid, the volume. So I'm surmising that more of the donors, there was high volume of low-level donors. Yep. So any one of their donors will undoubtedly not be happy about this and feel very not good about that. I think that it's not the biggest loss for them, probably. So about that part of your question, that's what I have to say about that. But as we move forward, I did have a communication with a very, very major donor in our community this morning, and he said that as a result of the Madoff scandal, he vets more and researches more organizations that he supports. And we also talked about the importance of local community-based organizations where you can walk in their doors, where you can really get to know people. Now, ironically, I myself am involved in a virtual online movement in my personal philanthropic passion, and I just had a realization that we have to be sure to offer, even through the virtual online presentation, program effectiveness, transparency in reporting, and as much actual, even if it's virtual dialogue and personal connection that you can get. But for localized, all the, well, 1,500,000 or 1,000,000 localized community-based organization, this is the time to personally reach out to your donors and for donors to personally reach out to their organizations. Don't you think so?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love the idea of, supporting the local charities that you can actually visit and talk to. And I think that most nonprofit organizations would welcome that sort of line of inquiry. I mean, we're not saying, hire a private investigator or anything, but, ask questions and they'll respond positively to that, because that's a nice level of engagement too.
Steve, let's put it this way. If they don't, that's a flag.
Yeah, absolutely. Right?
One of the things in my confident fundraising work that I'm discovering, I knew it's why I do it, and it's been verified over and over, is nonprofit CEOs are extremely burdened. There's very, I think probably more often than not, they're moved into these positions without all the skills necessary to really do their job well. I'm finding that the finance person might also have been moved up, inside the organization, but not have the actual background. That's not unethical. It may be not the smartest business practice. The people who are unfortunately in the development part of the organization, everybody isn't as well trained as everybody else, and so you got to look into that piece as well. But any organization that you care about, really, I'm talking to any listener today, any organization that you care about, if you can't get through to someone, I don't even care if it's a virtual movement. I started a virtual movement, and I'm, talk to people on the phone about it all the time. I don't care how big the organization is. If you can't get through to someone personally whom you can, really feel and really connect with and really, get information from, then that should be a flag to you.
Yep.
And that's where I guess I would say I would direct people, to think. Bloomerang friends and users, this great, fantastic community that you've created, a lot of them are these, sort of more community-based organizations.
Yeah.
I know there are colleges and prep schools in the group, but I really hope that every one of them heeds this call as a really, urgent and great opportunity to reach out to their donors. And I don't know how much time we have, but let's take a minute to talk about the board members as well.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, you know me, I'll go on forever about this. Okay. Board members, I'm talking to you. Many people who are involved with nonprofits as employees or advocates in any way also are board members of other organizations.
Sure.
So whoever is in our listening audience, whenever they're listening in, if you are a board member for an organization, by nonprofit law, basically, you have a fiduciary obligation to the organization. That means you need to know and understand how to read your organizational budget. You need to be aware of the patterns, the spending patterns, the income streams, the problems that come up in the organization. I'm not saying you should micromanage your organization. I am saying you need to be committed enough to any board that you sit on. Boy, I'm really ranting because this is
okay.
To any board that you sit on, to care enough and be committed enough to, do what you need to do. Participate actively. Learn the information that you need. Get to know the staff people, not just the CEO. I really think that this is a big, big issue out there, Steve. I don't know if you agree with that in your, vast experience.
I do. I think people struggle with board engagement in general. But but on the other side, if you're a board member signing up, I think you should bring those things to the table automatically, just through basic common sense and responsibility.
Yeah, but Steve, that's an assumption. That's a gross assumption, because
You're right.
most people don't, some people have never been on boards before. Some people have been on boards where they haven't been trained well. They haven't been given any orientation. They haven't.
So there is some responsibility on the organization to make those things happen.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And again, now we go back to, well, that's something else that has to happen, right? On top of making program happen, raising money, doing the marketing, dealing with crises, growing, even though I encourage organizations not to grow outside the foundational infrastructure support that they create. But yeah, I think that there is a big part here of board engagement that is very important to this issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's hard. There's, like you said, tons of things to do and concentrate on. It's super hard.
I have something to say about that too.
I thought you might.
Okay. I urge and encourage people to figure out your own philanthropic passion. Mm-hmm. Not just interest, but really figure out your philanthropic passion. This is a whole thing that I do. I have a philanthropy formula that I work on. I'm not selling here. I just want to say that when you find something, as it sounds like your wife feels about the organization she's involved with, but I'm not sure about that. But when you find something that you can feel deeply inside, it's a completely different connection that you have to the mission and the people and the productivity and the outcomes, and it feels on a sort of soul-based level that you want to be more engaged, fully engaged every day. You wake up like, what can I do to help and support this mission today? Mm-hmm. There are people who have to sit on boards for work, and they sit on 5 or 6 different boards. I don't agree with that. I don't approve of it, but I know it happens. But even, if you're on 2 or 3 boards, really, it's vitally important that you do some self-exploration about how you feel about your commitment to that organization. And if you do that self-reflection, you may have to get off the board if you realize that you're not feeling it. Yeah. But if you feel it, it's going to be a whole different kind of engagement for you.
Yep. Do some soul searching. I think that'll take care of 99% of these issues.
Yeah.
Well, Susan, this is great. Thanks for ranting with us. I know you got a call to jump on here. Where can people follow you? I want people to follow you on Twitter and read your awesome blog and all that good stuff.
Thank you so much. My website is confidentfundraising.com, and I also have a Facebook page called Confident Fundraising, and my other Facebook page is called What Will Your Legacy Be? So that's really, I'm at Susan Axelrod for Twitter, but I really want to leave people with a final thought. What will your legacy be?
Yeah,
thanks.
That's the question.
Thanks for listening, Steve.
Oh, always, anytime. We'll link to all that good stuff. Follow Susan. She's a good friend of ours, obviously very passionate. Thanks for hanging out with us. Really good advice, as always. And thanks to all of you for watching. We'll get through this, I promise. It'll be better.
Together we're stronger.
That's right. Have a good day, everyone. We will catch you next week with another great episode. So we'll talk to you then. Bye now.
Take care.